To meeting number 40 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we continue, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the back of the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. You'll also notice a QR code on the card, which links to a short awareness video. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name or ask a question directly by members. Before speaking, for those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channels for interpretation, either floor, English, or French, and for those in the room, you can use your earpiece and select the desired channel. I'd like to remind witnesses that the committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare the earpiece and select the listening channel in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Pursuant to the Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study on food security in the face of global instability. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for joining us here today from the Association Producteurs Marché de Québec. We have Patrice Léger-Bourgeois. From the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada, Marcus Jansen. Appearing alongside the fruit and vegetable growers, we have Greenhouse Producer Alliance of Canada with Julie Pellet, and the Union de Producteurs Agricoles de Courtneuf, Christian Herbert, who is the president. Each group will have 5 minutes, and then we'll go into questions. We will start with the Association de Producteurs Maraîchers de Québec. Welcome.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, good morning. Currently, 5 major retailers have about 3/4 of sales in Quebec and don't leave much room for other players. The numbers of corporate shops is on the upswing, and it's harder and harder for local supply, specialized in fruits and vegetables. There are about 300 throughout Quebec. There were thousands 25 years ago. For public markets, after a rise during the pandemic, about 15 have gone under. In parallel, the number of specialized businesses has diminished by 12%. The major retailers have centralized and integrated supply chains, so products, including fruits and vegetables, go through a centralized distribution center through Montreal. I'll share with you an example of a producer from the Quebec National Capital. About 20 years ago, the producer would have had access to a regional distribution center that would have served the east of the province. Now, the producer needs to invest in transport to send his products to Montreal for them to then come back to Quebec City. It's not all producers that can afford a long-distance truck fleet. The loss of satellite distribution centers has slowed down the development of regional suppliers and the diversification of distribution channels. Our organization owns the Producer Square in Montreal. As business models have evolved, major players have created their own distribution center in order to pursue integration. The Producer Square has repositioned itself as a main source of supply for local producers. However, the model is going to get more and more precarious if nothing is done. We're seeing the beginning of a consolidation movement by businesses in Quebec. That's a result of the enormous economic pressure that we've been dealing with for the last few years. In order to refer to comments said in previous meetings, I think we need to really think about our movement, which has consolidated and integrated supply chains and restricted diversification. Moreover, public support to agriculture in Canada is lower than those in similar countries. The international median is around 2%, but Canada gives less than 1%. In a context where climate, economic, and geopolitical risks are increasing, this is not okay. As a comparison, a few years ago, the USDA announced an investment of more than $1.5 billion that will be given to specialized vegetable growers in response to the rise in costs and foreign competition and those that practice undercutting. We agree that in North America, there's undercutting that goes on. You won't be surprised that fruit and vegetable producers are also dealing with rising competition in foreign countries. It's an open market, and many countries benefit from less restrictive environmental norms. So it's asymmetrical. This spring, we polled Quebec consumers. The results allowed us to show that around 90% count on their fruit and vegetable producers for food autonomy. Only 11% of them do not care about where products are from. And last spring, we analyzed that we saw that people care about fresh food. We think it's imperative for the government to interest in the integrated supply chain and its impact on fruits and vegetables. The concentration of supply chains is bad for distribution circles, so for the quality of competition and for regional representation. We have to fix this. Finally, it is imperative for the government, the Canadian government, financially support farmers given the global competitive nature of this market.
And the Greenhouse Produce Alliance of Canada. 5 minutes. I think were you presenting together? Yeah? Okay. Mr. Jansen, are you going first?
If that's the chair's wish, that's what I will do.
It's whatever you planned for. I think you're doing it together. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Whatever you decide.
Okay, Julie, would you like to go first then?
Such a gentleman. Thank you. Mr. Chair and honourable members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Greenhouse Produce Alliance of Canada. GPAC is the national voice of greenhouse fruit and vegetable growers and a trusted partner in advancing Canada's economic competitiveness, food security, and climate leadership. Canada's greenhouse fruit and vegetable growers generate approximately $6.3 billion annually to Canada's economy and employ an estimated 41,000 people across the value chain. Canadian agriculture is a proven economic driver, yet the greenhouse fruit and vegetable sector currently navigates a structural double squeeze, which positions primary producers between high market concentration on both the input and the retail sides of their operations. Greenhouse growers rely on integrated North American markets to grow their businesses, adopt new technologies, and expand production. In turn, Canadians benefit from a reliable supply of fresh, nutritious, high-quality, sustainably grown domestic produce throughout the year. Greenhouse agriculture is being asked to invest and grow during a time of rising pressures from geopolitical tensions, global climate change, and extreme weather events, and escalating trade pressures. For our members to prioritize food security, there's a need to act with some urgency. Industry and government must work together on pragmatic regulatory and fiscal interventions. We are seeking support for strategic priorities as outlined in the 3 pillars of our greenhouse investment roadmap that would, very briefly, 1, fuel economic competitiveness and trade resilience, 2, prioritize food security and business risk management, and 3, power climate-smart agriculture and innovation. Without strategic alignment of policy measures, greenhouse investment is at risk of being displaced to other North American jurisdictions and outpaced by U.S. incentives and programming that provide a friendlier business climate for major capital investment. We are seeking targeted, modernized programs that are effective at delivering at the scale our sector needs. The greenhouse fruit and vegetables sector stands ready to deliver food security, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
If we do go into Okay, Mr. Jensen, so go ahead.
Thanks, Julie. Mr. Chair and honorable members, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to appear on behalf of the fruit and vegetable growers of Canada. Our members grow more than 120 fruit and vegetable quantities across the country. These are everyday foods, but they are also strategic foods. Global instability, climate disruption, trade uncertainty, labor pressure, and rising costs mean Canadians cannot take domestic food production for granted. This committee study focuses on creating value in the food chain, encouraging investment and innovation, reducing barriers to economic activity, strengthening local production and processing, and supporting local purchasing. And these priorities align directly with our 2026 pre-budget recommendations made to the House Finance Committee. First, we believe that Canada needs to apply a food lens in federal decision-making. Regulation, trade, labor infrastructure, and program funding all impact whether growers can keep producing in Canada. A food lens means assessing decisions for their impact on domestic production, farm viability, competitiveness, and access to healthy food. Second, growers need timely access to effective crop protection tools. This is not about weakening protection for human health or the environment. It is about science-based decisions that also reflect real farm conditions. Without these tools, Canada faces lower yields, higher costs, more food loss, and a greater dependence on imports. And third, Canada must modernize business risk management and invest directly in resilience before disasters occur. Current programs do not adequately reflect the realities of horticulture, perishability, regional differences, or increasingly frequent extreme weather. Investments in water management, storage, processing, climate adaptation, applied research, and pest and disease preparedness would reduce risk and strengthen food security. Fourth, local production depends on reliable and stable labor and rural infrastructure. Seasonal workers, housing, transportation, and health services are food security infrastructure. And finally, more broadly, Canada needs more domestic processing capacity, stronger safeguards against unfair or non-compliant imports, and stable trade rules. Perishable products cannot simply be stored until markets improve. Growers need predictable supply chains and practical tools when disruptions occur. Canada's fruit and vegetable sector can deliver more local food, stronger supply chains, and lower vulnerability to global shocks.
Sir, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're about 20 seconds over, and I need to move on. Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm good.
Sorry? Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we have the Union des Producteurs Agricoles de Pont-Neuf. Mr. Herbert, 5 minutes.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present an initiative that, in our view, represents a concrete model for regional development in the fight against food insecurity and support for local agriculture, the Port-Neuf Food Voucher Program. I am speaking today on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Port-Neuf Farmers Union, a partner committed to this collective project that brings together the agricultural, community, municipal, and institutional sectors around a common goal to ensure that all citizens have access to fresh local food whilst supporting our farmers. For the Port-Neuf Farmers Union, this program is of particular importance because it creates a direct link between families and the farmers who grow, raise, and process food and feed our region. The food voucher program was launched in 2025 at the public markets in St. Raymond, Deschambault, Grandine, and St. Casimir. In its first year alone, it provided 94 vulnerable households with access to healthy, high-quality food for 12 weeks. But beyond the numbers, this program is fundamentally changing the way we approach food support. Traditionally, support measures for people experiencing food insecurity often rely on assistance models that, despite their importance, can sometimes create a sense of stigma. The food voucher program offers a different approach. Participants receive vouchers that they use directly at public markets, just like any other consumer. This allows them to choose their own food, meet producers, discover local products, and fully participate in the life of their community. That is the program's true strength. It simultaneously addresses two major societal challenges. On the one hand, it helps reduce food insecurity. The results speak for themselves. In 2025, the coupon usage rate reached 94%, clearly demonstrating that the need is real and that the targeted families have fully embraced this initiative. The program also generated over $63,000 in economic spin-offs at participating farmers markets. Of this amount, 12,670 came from coupons purchased directly by the public through La Ruche, demonstrating the public support for this initiative and their willingness to support both access to food and local purchasing. The data collected from participants is equally telling. More than 91% of respondents believe that the food vouchers made a significant contribution to their food budget during the summer season. Nearly 71% say the coupons help them reduce their grocery expenses, while 56% consider them the main factor enabling them to eat better. These figures show that we are not simply talking about a financial support program, but rather a concrete tool that improves families' quality of life and their access to healthy food. Furthermore, it directly supports the local agri-food economy. Every coupon used represents an additional sale for a local producer or processor. Finally, if I may, the coupon project, I had a dream that it goes from Port-Neuf and goes throughout Quebec, and even for it be a model for the rest of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will go to the conservatives for the first round. I think we'll bring it to 5 minutes each. We're probably going to hear the bells, and I'd like to see if we can get more than one round in, if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, okay. Mr. Gord, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Ma première question va être...
Hello, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Christian Hébert. Congratulations for your initiative. If you would like to add anything else to the initiative for your wish to expand, please feel free to send us a brief to the committee and we'll take it into account. However, if you could have money to put infrastructure in place to help you in your project, would that be welcome? Because for the time being, the government has a lot of projects. They're going to put $150 billion in for a project, and we don't know if it'll help anyone. But your project is really helping people. The issue at the time being is food affordability. And your project helps those in need. Can we help you? That's my mandate today in coming here before this committee. In the past, the federal government helped out BC with the coupon program. We didn't invent it here. It's via our partners that we saw what was being done in the Maritimes, in BC, and those investments were done that work. Our coupon program, it was about $63,000, but in BC, it was $8 million that go through the coupon program and $3 million in the Maritimes. About 2 or 3 years ago, the federal government gave the expertise center in food security, the mandate to study that and to create a program, a pilot project. There was Portneuf and the Bas Saint Laurent. It was $300,000. So we're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. We're not talking about billions of dollars. It's a few $100,000 to help our group, our stakeholders, those who come to Centraide. And we're creating something that's much bigger. Your support is extremely important. In your initiative with the coupons, it's a win-win situation. You're helping people who really need it and who have a hard time affording food. But you're also helping all the fruit and vegetable producers who, through their kiosks, are trying to sell their products. Because it's hard to incentivize people to go to the farmers markets because it's a bit of a detour. But with the food coupons, a lot more people will make it out to the farmers markets where they wouldn't have beforehand. Have you evaluated the impacts that that can have on regional farms? About a year ago, there was a considerable change on our businesses. Well, we have a lack of staff. And so on Saturdays, Fridays, in farmers markets, often the producers alternated. But then they saw that with the coupon program, every day there was about $7,000. They could make about $7,000 more. So people who didn't usually come to farmers markets, like I said, with the destigmatization, with the local buying program, plus with the food support, those two kinds of people were going to farmers markets, and that broke down the stigma. People realized that buying from farmers directly, it's cheaper than going to a big retailer. Buying meat directly from a beef producer or a fruit and vegetable producer, it's a lot cheaper than going from Costco because you don't have the 30, 40, 50% cut that middleman takes. Thank you. And what's the situation in Portneuf for the time being with the high-speed train that might go through that region? It's serious. It's serious. More than 200 producers will be affected. 120 businesses only in Portneuf, in our RMC. When you made the agroeconomists come back to estimate the viability of a farm, well, it won't be viable anymore, and they won't be able to renew their mortgage. It's a crisis for 120 businesses, and those businesses are the ones that feed our farmers markets, and there's a reason why we agree on this unanimously, community groups that we spoke to.
Thank you. Sorry. Next, we'll go to MP Dandren for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup et merci à tous les témoins d'être ici.
Thank you, and thank you to all witnesses for being here today. I think we all agree to say that food security is a very important issue, as well as with the rise of the cost of living. Sometimes people have a hard time feeding themselves when we're a country that's a major food producer. Moreover, this morning, I was at a meeting with the fruit and vegetable producers of Canada. Very interesting. Madame Payette, you were there as well. And we also spoke about that. One of the issues that we've spoken of, moreover, in your sector, is the extent to which we depend upon imports, food imports, in agri-food, and especially for fruit and vegetables. Do you have any comments on that? Do you agree that we are too dependent on imports? And how can we improve the situation?
Je suis d'accord avec vous.
I agree with you. We are too dependent upon imports. However, during winter, there are explanations. However, in the summer, and when there are a lot of imported products in supermarkets, well, that's quite worrying. And Basically, the centralization of supply chains is the reason why it's easier for major retailers to import food and it's cheaper because those markets have more lax norms. And that makes it hard for local producers. So often we look into the effects of concentration for the consumer, but we're not looking into the effects.
The bells are ringing. Sorry to interrupt you. The bells are ringing. I'm gonna have to ask for unanimous consent to continue going. Are folks planning to stay here to vote? Yeah. So everyone's fine with that? Do I need to formally, like we're fine? As long as we get, okay. Please continue. Thank you.
Alors, mon propos en disant, bon, on a commencé.
So we looked into the question of concentration of the major retailers with the voluntary code of conduct. We have 12 more months to show that retailers really want to change their behavior. And it doesn't seem to be the case so far. Moreover, I humbly suggest that the parliamentaries look into the integration of the supply chains. And I'm certain that it would be a relevant thing to do for the Competition Bureau. Do you have anything to add?
Merci.
Thank you. I agree with my colleague. And now I'll switch to English.
I think there is a need for the legislation to go further, that there should be some further binding terms and an interest in really making change. So I'll leave it at that for now. I know you have other witnesses that are experts in this regard. Thank you.
Merci. Ça me ramène, Monsieur Léger.
Thank you. That brings me to Mr. Bourgoin. You mentioned the Competition Bureau. They appeared last week, and we asked them to send them our recommendations in order to give them more flexibility for the supply chain, especially for regulation. So we hope that they will have solutions for us. You put an emphasis on businesses. Do you think we could bring in different grocery chains to Canada? No, honestly, no. There was a consolidation movement that was allowed, that was permitted, and bringing in a new chain, be it European or American, to come to Canada from coast to coast with the costs that it implies, well, it's unlikely. That's why, in my humble opinion, we need to put an emphasis on local food in order to diversify the situation in Canada. Local produce exists already, but the economic pressure that they're dealing with, faced with major retailers, well, it's really difficult, and we need to support local producers. The best way to deal with food insecurity brought about by geopolitical uncertainty is to ensure that our own food system is strong so that they can support domestic demand. And when there's diversification in supply sources, well, that allows more farmers to survive in the long term.
We'll go to the block now. I even gave you the extra 20 seconds when we had to stop for the unanimous consent. The block for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bourgoin, we know your CBC style. You gave us our opening remarks as if it was an objective news bulletin. You talked about where products come from. In my opinion, as my colleague said, there's something scandalous. I'd like to know what you really think about this. What do you mean? Well, this fall, you tried to understand if products on the store shelves are actually where they're said to be from, And does it put small producers at a disadvantage? The answer is yes, it's a problem. When we undertook our analysis, we saw that there were around 7 labeling errors on where products came. And clearly, those labeling errors affected Quebec products more than products from elsewhere. We can consider that the consumer will realize that it's really hard to get a papaya from Quebec, clearly, but when we mix up cauliflower from the US, from Mexico, and from Quebec, and that there's a big Quebec flag saying, oh, we're so happy to encourage local producers, that's unacceptable. Because people want to buy local. And another thing that you brought up, and you know it's important for us, is the ADL heritage that was bought up by a bigger company in 2006. Before that, we had an independent producer that made $210 million a year and helped local producers. And so that helped local producers to make it. And they even sold products in Ontario and northern Quebec, and their distribution center was in Rouyn-Noranda. Unfortunately, their activities were reduced, and clearly the image that's so ridiculous was a tiny Quebec village that had to travel 8 hours to Montreal and then come back, and that affected the freshness of their products. How can we recreate those models that allow our rural areas aren't penalized and to make sure that we have access to our real local products? 2 answers. First, we really need to encourage local food. The second, that's a bit more complicated, with centralization and the integration of supply chains, there's less and less affiliate stores. So affiliate stores previously in Quebec could encourage local suppliers. That's less and less a reality because those affiliate stores are asked to buy products through a central store. We call it a backdoor. So it's the ability for the local producer to deliver their products directly to the store. So why? Why is that model less and less accepted by major retailers? It's essentially in order to create a really clear dependence on a limited amount of suppliers. So what are the risks of having businesses that control the supply chain? More concretely, we're seeing the bulk producers as well. What's the risk? Well, the producer will not have access to distribution in their local community, and it'll have to go under. And so if the producer cannot access stores because it's too small and it doesn't have the logistical ability to fulfill the needs of the major retailers, well, then they'll go under. And the vocation of that producer is simply not viable. Can you make a parallel what's happening in Ontario versus Quebec regarding independent retailers? In Ontario, there are still small regional chains. In Quebec, there aren't any more. The concentration of major retailers is stronger in Quebec than elsewhere in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So just I wanted to give the committee a bit of an update. We will most likely we'll go till about 12:15, and then we'll suspend. We will go into the votes, come back around 12:35. That's if everyone agrees, of course. And then we'll go into the second round, and we'll probably stay an extra 10, 15 minutes if that's okay with people. And then the drafting instructions will postpone. We have we can do that next week. We won't have enough time today. And I've heard from the clerk that can still be fine for the analyst, right? So, okay. Okay, so we'll go to the next round. We'll do, we'll say 5 minutes each. 5, and 2.5. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today and colleagues for being present, sharing our wisdom. I think we've heard a lot about, not only today, but in other testimony, about the need for more tools and the cost of inputs, the requirement for applied research, access to new pesticides and products, and the impact of taxes and regulations and carbon tax, and the delay imposed by regulations on approvals result in increased cost to producers. And I don't think it's necessarily obvious to consumers how that is self-imposed cost is translated then to consumers. So I recently introduced a private member's bill, C-273, that of the Farm Act, to develop a trusted jurisdiction regime where we can apply a provisional approval or acceptance on new products, feed, seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and veterinary products as well, and through a little bit different track, that would really drive at reducing the regulatory timeline and the burden and access to new products to make our businesses and our industries more efficient in the ag space. That directly translates to improved variety and resilience and cost to consumers. So I wonder if you could comment, Mr. Jansen, on how that might impact the fruit and vegetable growers.
Thank you for your question. I would agree in that, especially on the processing side. I think particularly when I think about the fertilizer complex and how obvious it's become how dependent we are on particularly the Middle East. And it's my view that even if the conflict ended tomorrow, the world is not going back to the same place that it was before. Especially when it comes to crop protection tools, I think an alignment with shared jurisdictions that kind of have a similar objective as we do. I would think of a country like Australia, for example. I think for a lot of commodities, the single biggest impediment to growth is growers are becoming increasingly unsure that they can actually protect their crop. And so I take your point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That is, it causes me anxiety on my farm at home, right? On, am I going to be able to access the products I need to be able to compete with other jurisdictions in producing the crops and, generate an acceptable or a healthy net per acre to maintain viability of the farm or the greenhouse or the market garden or any of it. The self-imposed 35% tariff on fertilizers is something that's dramatic, right? And I think we need to help the public realize that much of these burdens and barriers we have are self-imposed. Ms. Pyatt, could you please comment on this relationship and the circumstance that we're in?
Thank you. I'm not an expert on this fertilizer tariffs per se. However, I think we have seen this as well in the greenhouse sector where in the past there's been a tariff on tomatoes that doesn't really allow to work together with our North American. It provided a response to the U.S. tariffs for sure, but our supply chains across North America do best when they are harmonized and able to trade freely, which is similar to the crop input as well. And at this point, we also see some misalignment in terms of the impacts that steel tariffs are having as well on our greenhouse building structures and the infrastructure investment. So we would like to see alignment for growth in the sector and just increased understanding of what that system requires to be competitive.
I think it's important that we remove the self-imposed barriers, and so I appreciate your comments on that, and especially related to crop protection products and innovative products that just aren't available in Canada because the regulatory regime is too high. And so, Mr. Bourgeon, if you wanted to comment on that.
Your time's done. Thank you very much. Mr. Connors, 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for coming out. My first question is, we're studying food security in the face of global instability, and I guess being able to feed ourselves domestically. And we hear people say, oh, people want to buy local. I'm not sure if that always translates in at the cash register where people want to buy local. I don't know if you see that in your industry. But I'd like to know what challenges or unique challenges your organization or producers face in supplying domestic food to address food security in our country. And I'll start with Mr. Jensen.
Thank you for the question. I think it's important to not lose sight of the fact that Canada is a northern climate, and for us to supply fresh fruits and vegetables 12 months of the year, there has to be a trading relationship, particularly between the U.S. as well as Mexico. And so the ability of Canadian producers to export products that we can grow competitively needs to be there in order that we have the monetary capability to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables in the winter from warmer climate jurisdictions. So the idea of Canadian producers being able to supply a reasonably broad spectrum of fruit, vegetables year-round is exceedingly difficult. There are some exceptions. We'll take cucumbers. The technology is there to grow them under lights now, so Canada can produce cucumbers for 12 months of the year. But that product is the exception, not the rule.
I'll go to Mr. Bergwijn.
Je vous dirais, si on prend par exemple...
Take the example of carrots in Quebec. That's close to food autonomy. We have enough carrots in winter to cover us until spring. So the question is, in that context, how is it possible that we still have carrots from China in winter? And it's because it's the same price. It's sold at the same price, but the retailers are making more money off it. And so Quebec carrots just stay in their massive refrigerators. There are also frozen vegetables, and fruit and vegetable producers have that economic reality. And more major chains are importing food from China, Egypt, Thailand, because that's in their interest. But when we don't support independent producers and instead import food, we're imperiling our local supply chain.
Just for clarification, when you say you have enough carrots to supply, is that just Quebec or all of Canada?
Oui, c'est pour...
For Quebec. However, in the model we have in Canada, provinces communicate. So when we're getting low on stocks, well, we can manage our pan-Canadian supply according to available supply. So let's say Ontario also produces a lot of carrots. They're a major carrot producer in North America, just like us. So unfortunately, I don't know how autonomous Ontario can be in terms of carrots, but the amount of carrots produced in Quebec over the last few years, well, we can get until the end of March, beginning of April, before we tell Agriculture Canada that we don't have any more carrots in stock.
Ms. Payette, do you have anything to add in 25 seconds?
I would just add, I think sometimes it's not just a supply issue, but there are issues and concerns about business interruption or instability, and we've seen that playing such a huge role. And to Marcus's point about year-round supply, I think there's a lot of push to say, well, we can do that in a greenhouse, but the production in a greenhouse requires a lot of parts and pieces, just like it takes a village to raise a child. It does take a lot of parts and pieces relating to energy, et cetera. Thank you.
And next we'll go to the block. Sebastian, I'll give you 3 minutes just because I gave a little bit of extra time here.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Aubert, Christian, I've followed your Facebook page with great interest, especially recently with the Alto issue. First, you were on the Téléjournal with a very clear stance. Please explain why the Alto project, as you said, is not a good priority or a fake good idea, and the impact that it will have on the psychological health of farmers. We had Mr. Bercier last week, who was quite eloquent on the subject, so please speak to the impact of farmers' mental health regarding Alto. Now, speaking to food security, the world is changing, and the way of producing is changing. This week, we're really happy. It's the launch of the strawberry season in Quebec. We're the third strawberry producer on Earth. The first is Mexico, second is California, and Quebec is number 3. And normally, this week, there would have been Mexican products dumping. We've experienced that for the 15 years that I've been working when we come with our products. But right now, it's hard for Mexico and California. In California, they're dealing with droughts, and they've stopped. Their prices have really skyrocketed. So now, what's happening here is, for the time being, when I'm saying the world is changing, prices are changing, we need to change stereotypes. So in Portneuf, we have the biggest strawberry producer in Canada. We have producers, and these businesses may disappear. Businesses might go under for the most major producers. Transport was already in place. For those that already bought strawberry fields, well, they're already at their max, and with the economic crisis. Well, mental health isn't just one issue, it's a combination of issues, and currently we're walking a tightrope. In the first 3 months of 2025, the number of businesses in my sector that are going under, it's the equivalent to the last 10 years. And now on top of that, we're adding the high-speed train. People are getting crazy. They're losing their ability to make a profit that people have built up. And it's a social crisis, what I said earlier. And MPs in rural areas are experiencing it. People who live in rural areas are experiencing it. The community groups around us, they're also worried. It's a whole economy. It's a real crisis. And I know that it's not by asking for pity that will convince people who live in the cities. But it's with this argument around food security. The cost of the inability to make a profit, that's over 200 businesses or farms that will be impacted. And now there are 2,500 businesses. That's the equivalent of what Hydro-Quebec makes.
so much. Thank you very
Merci,
much.
Christian.
Okay, thank you. There's roughly about 5 minutes before the vote starts. We're going to suspend now. For that 5 minutes, folks can get ready to vote. There'll probably be about another 15 minutes after, so about 20 minutes from now, we'll come back. So I'll suspend and see you in 20 minutes. To bring the meeting back to order pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025. The committee is resuming its study on food security in the face of global instability. I'd like to welcome our witnesses joining us here today from the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, Tyler McCann, Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada, Michael Graydon, and from the Office of the Grocery Sector Code of Conduct, Karen Proud. And I didn't mention that MP Rana is joining us today, filling in for Mr. McDonald. Welcome to the committee. We appreciate you being here. Oh, that's the first time anyone's clapped for, so you're in good standing at this this committee. We'll go to Mr. Graydon for 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Graydon. Folks, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to represent the Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada food manufacturers today. Food security is not only about what Canada grows, it's about whether we can process, package, move, and supply the food Canadians rely on every day. Just as Canada views energy, transportation, and telecommunications as strategic infrastructure, we should view food manufacturing capacity as essential national infrastructure that underpins food security, economic resilience, and affordability. At a time of affordability pressures, tariff uncertainty, and global supply chain disruptions, strengthening domestic food manufacturing is essential to jobs, investment, innovation, resilience, and food sovereignty. Food security is also a productivity issue. Canada's challenge is not weak firms or complacent workers. It's an investment and scale problem. Business investment per worker remains significantly below the United States, reflecting higher operating costs, regulatory complexity, and investment uncertainty. When multinational companies decide where to place the next production line, automation project, or processing facility, Canada is competing for capital. If Canada is slower, more expensive, less predictable, or less aligned with major trading partners, that investment will go elsewhere. At the same time, many Canadian small and mid-sized manufacturers face enterprise-level regulatory obligations, and the access to capital is increasingly challenging. This missing middle limits their ability to scale, compete, and supply Canadians with affordable products year-round. We're already starting to see the consequences. More than half of many center store grocery products are now imported primarily from the United States. The manufacturing capability still exists in Canada, but the investment environment does not consistently encourage expansion. Without change, Canada risks becoming more of a distribution market than a manufacturing economy, leaving Canadians increasingly dependent on foreign production for everyday food products. If we want a more resilient food system, greater affordability, and stronger domestic production, there are 3 actions Ottawa can take. First, put capital behind domestic manufacturing capacity. Canada needs a domestic food processing fund that supports modernization, automation, facility expansion, and equipment upgrades across the manufacturing sector. Funding should support the full manufacturing ecosystem. Large manufacturers anchor regional supply chains, while mid-sized manufacturers are often the most structurally constrained. Both are essential to Canada's food security and economic growth. Strategic investment in processing capacity would strengthen Canada's ability to produce more food at home, improve productivity, create jobs, and help stabilize food costs for Canadian consumers. Second, modernize regulation without compromising safety. Canada's food safety system is a competitive advantage and a source of public trust. No one is asking government to lower our standards. However, regulatory systems must be faster, more predictable, better aligned with trusted trading partners, and more attentive to accumulated costs. Food security and affordability depend not only on safe food, but also on a regulatory system that enables innovation, investment, timely access to products and to technology. Expanding the Canadian Food Inspection Agency's mandate to consider economic competitiveness and food security alongside safety is a step in the right direction. And third, strengthen the supply chains and workforce that food security depends on. That means investing in transportation infrastructure, improving trade corridors efficiencies, and reducing bottlenecks that increase costs and delay the movement of food across our country. It also means maintaining access to skilled workers through agricultural labor programs and creating stronger pathways to permanent residency for experienced workers in year-round agri-food occupations. Local purchasing initiatives only succeed when there is sufficient local capacity to support affordable products. The best way to support local purchasing is to help Canadian manufacturers invest in their workers, expand production, and move their goods efficiently to market. Canada does not need to choose between global trade and local resilience. We need both: integrated North American supply chains and a stronger domestic manufacturing base that captures more value here at home. Food security will be achieved through investment, productivity, modern regulation, efficient supply chains, skilled workers, and a whole-of-government commitment to strengthening Canada's agri-food economy. The investment decisions that will shape Canada's food system for the next decade are being made right now. Too often, Canada is not winning in those decisions. At FHCP, our members want to build here, they want to hire here, they want to innovate here, and supply Canadians from Canadian facilities. But investment follows certainty. If Canada wants stronger food security, greater affordability, and more resilient economy, we must make this country one of the best places in the world to manufacture food. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Ms. Proud. Welcome back to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the invitation to appear before you today. And I also want to thank the committee for your continued interest in the work of the Office of the Grocery Sector Code of Conduct. I had the opportunity to appear before this committee on 2 occasions last year during your study of the implementation of the code, and I appreciate the opportunity to return and provide a bit of an update on the progress we have made since then. The Canada Grocery Code is a voluntary industry-led initiative meant to provide shared principles and trade standards for stakeholders across the supply chain. The Office of the Grocery Sector Code of Conduct is the independent organization responsible for supporting the implementation of the Grocery Code, monitoring compliance with the code, providing education and guidance to industry participants, and administering both a confidential issue reporting process as well as a formal dispute resolution management process. Since becoming operational, my office has worked closely with retailers and suppliers, as well as industry associations across the country, to support the implementation of the code and to promote greater consistency in commercial practices throughout the grocery supply chain. The committee's current study is focused on food security in the face of global instability. While the Grocery Code is not a food security policy instrument, there are important connections between the objectives of the code and several of the issues being examined by the committee. The code does not increase agricultural production, create processing capacity, establish trade policy, or address infrastructure and labor challenges. Nor does it regulate food prices or profit margins or require businesses to purchase Canadian products. Rather, the code is a framework intended to improve the way businesses work together by promoting fair dealing, transparency, predictability, and accountability in commercial relationships within the grocery sector. These objectives may seem modest, but they are important foundations for a more resilient and more competitive food supply chain. Investment and innovation are more likely to occur when businesses operate within a predictable commercial environment. Whether a company is considering investing in new equipment, expanding production capacity, introducing new products, or entering new markets, confidence in commercial relationships is an important factor in those decisions. The code supports that confidence by establishing common expectations around issues such as written agreements, reasonable notice of changes, dispute resolution, and the management of commercial disagreements. Similarly, resilient supply chains depend on effective mechanisms for resolving issues when they arrive. Periods of disruption can place significant pressure on commercial relationships. Having clear expectations and established processes to address concerns can help businesses focus on solving problems rather than escalating disputes. The code is also intended to support participation by businesses of all sizes. Through the code's dispute resolution and issue reporting mechanisms, businesses have access to processes that can help address concerns and identify systemic issues affecting the sector. This contributes to a more transparent and predictable operating environment across the supply chain. Over the past year, the office has continued to build these foundations. Membership in the office has grown to more than 200 organizations representing retailers and suppliers from across Canada. We have established both confidential and formal mechanisms for raising concerns, undertaken information gathering exercises to better understand emerging challenges. We've issued 2 guidances on 2 specific issues and created new opportunities for stakeholders to provide input into the ongoing evolution of the code. Perhaps most importantly, we are beginning to see businesses engage proactively with the office to seek clarification, information, and guidance. We are also seeing the code being used as a framework for commercial discussions and negotiations between members who have signed up to the code. These are encouraging signs that the code is helping to foster a culture of greater communication, transparency, and problem solving across the sector. But it is still early in the implementation of the code. The experience to date suggests that clear standards, transparent processes, and constructive dispute resolution can contribute to a stronger commercial relationship and more resiliency in the grocery supply chain. Although the code is only one piece of a much broader food security landscape, its role is to help ensure that the businesses responsible for producing, processing, distributing, and selling food in Canada are operating within a framework that supports predictability, trust, and collaboration. I look forward to discussing the committee study further and answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Mr. McCann. It looks like you're at an airport, so thank you for joining us today.
I am. Your bells have impacted my ability to get to my 2 o'clock flight on time, but certainly thank you for the invitation to be here today. Au Canada et partout dans le monde, le secteur agricole et le système.
The interpretation will resume when sound quality improves.
Et les consommateurs canadiens contre les effets négatifs de cette politique mondiale. It's important to start by acknowledging some important distinctions.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. I've just been told that the interpretation's not working. We'll try testing. Hello, hello, hello. Can anyone hear me? Can you hear when I'm speaking? The interpretation? Yeah?
The sound isn't good enough for us to do the work. That's the problem.
Connection, he can try again.
Yeah, your connection, sir, is not coming through properly. Can you try again?
Okay, is this better now? Do I have the right settings for interpretation?
It might be a bad connection. That's 2 bad connections in one day.
We'll do our best. The connection is cutting out, but we'll try.
It's cutting in and out. You can continue. If they can't do it, then we're going to have to stop. So please go ahead, sir.
I understand. And so I will go to my 5 recommendations. First, as your recent BRM study has shown, Canada needs to evolve its approach to risk management. Policies and programs need reform so that farms have more choice and effective risk management tools. 2, Canada needs to double down on agriculture innovation. Federal, provincial, territorial governments should commit to an agri-food innovation strategy at their meeting this summer. 3rd, Canada needs to commit to a critical input strategy. While we think of Canada as fertilizer secure, Eastern Canada is a major importer, and we rely on imports of important inputs like seed and chemistry. A starting point is to remove fertilizer tariffs, but Canada needs a more focused effort to increase production and secure the supply of critical inputs. And 4th, more needs to be done to support transportation infrastructure. The recent budget investments are an important step forward, but governments should be looking at the unique needs of the food supply chain, including with cold storage to support food supply chain resilience. Finally, governments should look at how they can leverage the procurement tools they have to support Canadian production. The National School Food Program would be a good place to start to ensure that Canadian governments are supporting Canadian food. I will submit my full remarks, but hope to have the opportunity to take more questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We'll go to the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Bonk.
Thank you. Mr. Carney warned that a country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, and defend itself has few options, and that Canadians can judge him by the price of food at the grocery store. And I wouldn't. I think he's regretting saying those things at the moment, but because at the moment, under his leadership, Canada is the only G20 country that's in a recession. And we lead the G7 in food inflation. And over a decade of these regressive liberal policies and inflationary spending have driven investments, particularly in agriculture, out of Canada. And I'd like to start with Mr. McCann. We talk about food resilience and food security in Canada. Yet one of the main things we can do to increase production in Canada is have access to fertilizer and chemical products. And fertilizer prices have increased by 40 to 50%. I know they have on my farm. And that's year over year. That's just taking in the last year alone. And then yet we have carbon tax, we have clean fuel standards. Can you maybe comment on how this is making Canada very uncompetitive in a globally priced market?
I think that we take our inputs for granted in Canada. We need to be more serious about this. I think the National Food Security Strategy that is supposed to come soon should commit clearly to a critical inputs strategy that must look at ensuring the supply is there, that must look at regulatory changes to make it easy to produce more, permitting changes to make it easier to produce more. This is, I think, something that for too long, it's been too easy to ensure that farmers will have fertilizer, pesticides, other important products. We need to realize that that world has changed, and we need to take this far more seriously than we have in the past.
I know if I look at where I am from, I'm in southeast Saskatchewan, so we're right on the border with Montana and North Dakota. And let's just take a crop like canola, for example. They can produce that crop 15 to 35% cheaper, according to estimates that I've seen, than we can in Canada just because of regulation. Do you have any advice to give this committee on how we can make the Canadian agriculture sector more competitive?
So I think regulatory change comes up over and over again. I think that this is something that this committee should not stop talking about and should not stop holding the government to account. Officials in this government need to act and need to make change. This is a man-made challenge that we have in Canada. We can talk a lot about the impacts of climate change and volatility, but the impacts of the regulatory environment are impacts that are imposed by government officials in Ottawa and in provincial capitals across the country. This is something that we need to do more on to deliver more serious change.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned one of your 4 pillars was innovation. And recently we've had an announcement from the Liberal government that they're going to close 7 agriculture research centres across Canada that have been world leading in some of the innovations that they brought forward, such as zero-till, for example, and I believe it's up to 60 or 80% of the seed varieties that we use in Western Canada are developed at these research centres, and yet they're being closed. Could you maybe comment on, when you mention innovation, do you think that this will have a negative or a positive impact, the closing of these stations, on Canadian agriculture?
Certainly, cuts in innovation spending have an impact. I think one of the problems is that we've seen some cuts over the last decades. Spending on agriculture innovation goes down, but we only feel that impact, many years later. The closure of research sites make this very upfront. We will see this, very clearly and presently the impact of that, but the impacts of long-term cuts will have long-term negative consequences. We need to double down on innovation. Again, this is something that we have just taken for granted, that farmers will always have access to new varieties, will always have new technology that will be available, but we do not have the track record over the last 10 years, over the last 20 years that we had 20 or 40 years ago in giving farmers the tools that they need. We need to do this more seriously. And I would like to see the federal government, but also their provincial governments, commit this summer to a more meaningful, substantial ag innovation strategy when Minister McDonald meets with his counterparts this summer.
When it comes to business risk management tools, what are you envisioning in your 4 pillars that you had mentioned? BRM was on top. So
that's right. So
go ahead.
We need to give farmers more choice and more tools. Effectively, today we try and treat all farmers the same. We like to think that one set of programs can give farmers all of the tools that they need, but we know that farms today are very different. It's not just one region or the other, or one commodity or the other, but farms are in different business cycles and they need different tools. We need to recognize that and find more ways to give farmers more innovative risk management tools that are better suited and more effective against the risks in this new volatile world that we're in. We can't just say agri-stability and crop insurance are your 2 options. We need to look at a different world. That doesn't mean we take those tools away. If a farmer still wants to use crop insurance, a farmer still wants to use agri-stability, we should probably let them, but we need to create a space where we're giving them better, more innovative tools to use instead.
From your vantage point from the institute that you represent, what would be your take on Alto and the confiscation of valuable farmland in Ontario and Quebec?
20 seconds left.
It's unfortunate that Canadians live in some of the best, most fertile farmland in this country. We've seen provincial governments that go out of their way to take farmland out of production. There was opposition to that. There needs to be opposition to federal efforts to take farmland out of production too.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. MP Chatel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bienvenue à
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of our witnesses today. Mr. McCann, first, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for coming to my riding to meet farmers and processors, as well as many people involved in food security, which is moreover one of our themes today. What did you hear from people concretely, on the ground, on the issue of food security? What I heard is that there is a challenge. On the one hand, there are producers that want to produce food. They want to be a stakeholder in the local economy. They want to ensure food security on a local level, but there are challenges. There are questions for supply chains. There's the issue of local infrastructure to ensure that they can bring their food directly to the consumer or to market. And there's a need for an action plan. What we hear all too often in Canada is a plan based on local markets, on local supply chains. Too often, we act on a national level, but that creates a market on a two-speed system, one based on national and international markets, and then there are local systems. We ought to do more to support this local supply chain to ensure that producers like those in your riding can play a larger role in food security. Thank you very much. I will also ask questions to Mr. Graydon. Mr. Graydon, earlier, you spoke to production as being an important factor in Canadian food security. We need to do more here in Canada to not just become a distribution market, but rather a processing market. We've identified the agri-food sector a while ago as one that ought to grow. We put a super reduction in place to increase investment in technology for machinery. There's also the Rapid Response Fund for the tariffs that allows for quick investment in the agri-food industry. In your opinion, Mr. Graydon, if you had one piece of advice for the government to seek out that economic potential in food processing, what would your piece of advice be?
I think the advice would be to continue. The investments that have been made have actually stimulated some capital investment. A lot of it is foreign capital investment. Multinationals who have access to capital have made some very significant contributions to the expansion of capacity here. I think in the last 9 months, we're probably looking at in the neighborhood of $2 billion in capital investment in major plants across the country. And some of the initiatives that you outlined have stimulated some of that confidence in the Canadian market. We need more of it. And we also need mechanisms to be able to stimulate capital investment in the small to medium enterprises, which really do struggle to find access to capital.
And would you say that the FCC investment, like the $7 billion fund, and a large part of it being dedicated to the investment in the agri-food sector, can be a way to access capital? And if not, what else should the government do?
Yes, I think the program FCC's put together has certainly contributed. There's $7 or $8 billion accessible to the marketplace. The importance is finding the ease to access and making sure that it's not so complex that, and because many of these small to medium enterprises do not have the infrastructure to figure a lot of this stuff out. So you've got to make it easier for them. And so I think if there's less complexity, accessibility to that money will get translated into investments. So I think it also requires, while the agricultural community talks a lot about agri-food, this needs to become part of the dialogue across government in all aspects of it. We are and have the potential to be a powerhouse, but it has to be an all-of-government discussion. It cannot just be an agricultural discussion.
Merci beaucoup. Madame Proud, partie de la sécurité.
Ms. Proud, concerning food security, we look at all of the supply chain, including supermarkets. In your experience, not only your experience applying the Code of Conduct, but in working with stakeholders, Canada has 5 major retailers on the market. Could we explore having more competition? And as Mr. McCann just said, at the round table, there's a lot of talk of an ecosystem of supermarkets where we can connect producers with consumers. In your opinion, would that be a good initiative?
There's 6 seconds.
Yeah. You can send it to us in writing as well.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame Proud.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Proud, the Code of Conduct is underway. How has that impacted retailers and producers?
So the Code of Conduct launched on the 1st of January in full implementation. The impact to retailers and suppliers and producers is really for those that have joined the code, and so we've had 200 members. The code sets out a framework of trade rules as to how retailers and suppliers are to interact in certain areas and certain aspects. We are in very early days. What I have found over the last 6 months is a great willingness to discuss the code, to discuss issues related to the code, an openness and a commitment to the principles and objectives of the code. And so that's all very, very positive. Time will tell if that willingness translate to a willingness to change practices. And that's really what the code is about. I'm optimistic based on the conversations I've had. And certainly those who have been able to use the code in conversations have been effective.
Vous avez mentionné qu'il y a environ...
You mentioned that there's around 200 people who have signed on, 38 in Quebec. Why do you think there are so few businesses participating in Quebec?
I think it has to do a lot with awareness building. So we're still, again, very early days in the code. My office is trying to do everything we can to raise awareness about the fact that the code exists, the importance of the code, the tools that people have available to them. We launched something earlier in the year called Code on the Road, where we are trying to meet people where they are to raise awareness about the importance of the code. I think over time, we're going to get those numbers up. There's still some skepticism about how this code is going to play out, and we need to address that and make sure that those that should be part of the code who will benefit from it become members.
Je fais partie de...
I have a lot of hope on the code's ability to help lower prices. However, last week, the Competition Bureau came here and said that we can't deal with the inequality between producers and retailers. What do you think about that? Do you think that there's more of a level playing field now because of the code?
So the code, I'm also very hopeful about the code generally, but the code does not address prices, and that's a very, very important clarification. I do think the code helps businesses of all sizes get a level playing field when it comes to raising issues and having disputes addressed. And that's really very important, where a company of any size can come to the office. They can deal without having lawyers or big administrative burden. We can listen to their issues and try and address them. And I think that's really where the code helps to level that playing field, where people can access the office and the strength of the office to try and address the issues. We will not fix the dynamic of difficult negotiations between very large players and very small players, but the provisions within the code try and at least create a fair framework in which those conversations can happen.
Justement, on a porté à mon attention.
I learned that horticultural associations tried to have a meeting with the retailer to talk about systemic issues in their sector. Your work is to undertake mediation. That was not accepted by your office. Why? Is that part of your role, to help with mediation between retailers and associations like the Horticultural Association?
So we are not mediators. If the Horticultural Association, by example, have systemic issues that they want to address that relate to the code, we welcome them to bring those issues to us, and we will try and have conversations with retailers or others based on those issues. We do not sort of bring parties together and mediate between them. Part of the principles of the code is really that industry is supposed to try and work things out amongst themselves. If those discussions aren't successful and there are code-related issues, that our office can then take and have our own conversations and try to push in our own way using the tools we have. That's how the office operates, but we are not a third-party mediator.
Okay. Pourquoi selon
In your opinion, why is it still so hard for small local producers in rural areas like mine to make it to supermarkets? Why is it possible for some local supermarkets to have local produce but not in big chains?
So I think that question falls a little outside of my area of expertise. I know that some of the large retailers have put programs in place to try and encourage and make it easier for local organizations and small companies to do business, but I can't comment professionally on why that continues to be difficult.
C'est un espoir que je pouvais avoir.
Well, I remain hopeful on that point. Since the beginning of your mandate, have you seen any violations of the code? If yes, which business have accumulated the most violations up till now?
Or no?
So we've received complaints and we've looked into complaints, but the complaint system we have is highly confidential.
Thank you very much. So we'll go into we'll go for about another eight or 9 minutes. Why don't we do 3, 3, and 2? Is that fair? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions. First question to you, Ms. Proud. We heard the finance minister at the time, a few years ago when he was industry minister, make a statement that the code would lower food prices. In your opening statement, you said that the code is not meant to lower food prices. So I take it his statement was inaccurate, and really it doesn't lower food prices, because I think Canadians would testify that prices are going up as it relates to food.
So the purpose of the code is not to lower food prices.
Okay.
If there's something that happens in the end because of better business relationships, perhaps, but that is not the purpose of the code.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Graydon, Canada and the United States share one of the most deeply integrated agricultural and food systems in the world, and it's been that way for literally hundreds of years now, and back and forth across the border. So vital to our producers and farmers. And right now, at a time where food security should be paramount on the minds of every government, and of course here in Canada, do you feel enough is being done to make sure that relationship is sound, and that all that can be done to mitigate areas of friction is being done, and that the proper steps are being put in place to keep Canada's producers and farmers in the best possible competitive position they can be? Because we know they make good products, we know they grow great food, but the challenge is, of course, is the regulatory and the tax burdens they're under. Can you speak to that, Mr. Gray?
Yes, I think, as it goes to the relationship between the discussions on free trade with the United States, things are moving along. I think the fact that, the CUSMA compliant parts of our business have been carved out, and we have no tariffs on majority of our business is very good. I think this is an opportunity for Canada to sort of open its eyes a little bit and really focus a little bit more on self-sufficiency and a little less on reliance. While it's very important, the trade component of it, we've, I think, allowed a lot of manufacturing capacity to evaporate from this country and allowed free trade to sort of take some of the energy out of the productivity of this country. There needs to be better balance, and we do need to trade with the United States. It's a tremendous opportunity to grow and scale your businesses, but at the same time, we can't have ultimate dependency. And unfortunately, I think there's an element of dependency has crept into it that we need to resolve.
And in your estimation, Mr. Green, what would be the things that the government should be prioritizing or doing to make the atmosphere much more conducive for competitiveness for our producers so that they can have a more sure and level footing for doing what they do so well?
Yeah, the regulatory environment here needs to modernize and be better aligned to today's manufacturing. In some cases, the Food and Drug Act, for instance, some of it's 70 years old. Things have changed. And so that modernization is required, the red tape reduction is required, and there needs
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the next. Thank you, sir. MP Harrison for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to jump right in. Mr. Graydon, you wrote an op-ed after you were here in December, and I completely agree with you. You say Canada's productivity problem is a depth problem, not a talent problem. And you go on to talk about, the grocery store aisles and how most of the products that we find in the center aisles were once manufactured here, but now almost all imported. And in your opening statement, you said that there's so part of that is trade quarter problems. So would you be able to elaborate more about specifically the issues we have in Canada with trade corridor inefficiencies?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, many of these companies that do a good portion of the volume in the country are multinationals. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the manufacturers do 80% of the volume. That's a global issue. It's not just a North American issue. And so this North American relationship of free trade has got its values, but it also has created that environment where we're not as resilient as we should be and not as self-sufficient. We're not utilizing the opportunity of this agri-food superpower that we have. Many of the agricultural products leave this country, are sent to the United States, processed into ingredients, and come back into this country, and with inflated costs that are applied to the operating costs or the input costs of the products, the finished products. So, I think taking a better approach in regards to getting better balance between trade and resiliency and self-sufficiency in Canada needs to be done. And so we need to stimulate capital investment. We need to make it easier for these organizations, and many of them are foreign entities that have really bet on Canada. And so we should be embracing them and finding opportunities to be able to welcome even more manufacturing to be able to continue to grow and create the jobs that come with it.
Thank you very much. And to Ms. Proud, nice to see you again. We talked a little bit about the Grocer Code of Conduct, and my colleague just talked a little bit about, what is its ability to, I guess, help with food security, particularly in Canada. And I was wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add about where this falls under food security.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it speaks to creating a better business environment between suppliers and retailers. And when one does that, and hopefully the code does achieve that in many aspects, it does encourage more investment by suppliers in this country when they know that they have sort of clear business rules and a good relationship with their partners within the sector. And I think that can contribute certainly to food security here. It also hopefully helps the smaller producers who you've heard through this study do business more with the grocers. And we're working hard in my office to try and identify exactly what those issues are for the primary producers so that our office can then go forward and try and address those issues. There's many issues within the sector. You've heard a lot of them. Only some might relate to the code of conduct, and we have gathered a group together to try and hear those concerns.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the block for the final 2 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Madam Proud. In your 2025 investigation that you recently published in May 2026, the results showed that small and medium producers, that they were unsure of the beneficial impacts of the code. Today, in your opinion, what are the positive impacts of the code after 6 months? And in your opinion, what would they respond to the poll if they could respond now?
So when it comes to small producers, as I mentioned, there's a lot of challenges within that sector, especially having to do business with very, very large organizations. My office recently pulled together a fruit and vegetable liaison group so we could specifically hear from some of those small producers what their issues are and what issues may be related to the code. I'm waiting to get that report. It's my deputy who's been managing that group, asking those producers to prioritize the issues that they have that are code related that we can then go forward and have a look at. If we can address some of those issues, we are hoping that we can make it easier for these organizations to do business and address some of their major changes. I've heard about some of their complaints, but that's where I think we will need to demonstrate the value to the primary producers for them to believe that there is value for them.
Je sais que vous avez répondu que
So you said that complaints are confidential, but could you tell us if there are more complaints done or invitations to do dispute settlement, and could you give us an idea of the numbers of those complaints?
Yes, so actually next week, my office is going to be releasing our first ever public report where we will talk about exactly what we have heard from January until now. We have gotten a number of complaints through our confidential process, not a huge number. I think we've had 9 specific complaints that we've received. We've looked at some. We've done some of our own information gathering exercises. We've issued some guidance. We have had a few organizations inquire about the more formal dispute resolution. All of that will be in our report that we release next week, and we will make sure to send a copy of the report to this committee, and I'd be happy at any time to come back and talk about the contents of that report.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
And that's the end of our meeting. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us here today. Mr. McCann, I hope you get onto your flight on time. Thank you for taking time to join us, and thank you to both of our witnesses that joined us here. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn? Okay, adjourn. Thank you.
Merci aux